I don't have any reason to believe that's true because I have no proof about that. But this information that's on the checklist has been going all the way back to the 1800s, has been posted by law, required to be posted in the public square.
Not on the internet.
Right,
That changes.
that's the
There's a
change.
difference
Well-
between walking into an office and saying, I want to look at that data on a hard copy. and
This
then-
is not going to be seen on the internet.
But they're saying it is. That's
We have no
one of the
guarantees of
concerns.
that.
But it,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
The committee hasn't met yet, so you really don't know what the guidelines are going to be. Isn't that
it's,
correct?
it cannot, it is, first of all, it's exempt.
Agreed.
It's exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. It can never be, the public cannot get to see that.
Agreed.
And I will be sure that,
You'll get assurances from the commission that this will never go on the internet and be made public for everybody.
yes, absolutely.
I
So
still
that's-
have fears about
What?
I still have fears about people's perception of if they vote, information about them will be given out, and that it has the negative impact of getting rid of voters. People will stop voting if they think that their information for exercising their right to vote is going to be shared recklessly, which is what a lot of people think this is.
I'm
The,
fielding questions.
the
that-
information that we're talking about is only information that is publicly available right now and in the past. It's only a
Well, then
person.
let them get it publicly.
It's only a person. It's only a person's name and a person's address, and whether the person is registered in a political party, and that you multiple times during the course of a year, every single year, that information is posted. It has to be by law before every town election, school election, state primary, state election. So this information is out there. There are towns that have the checklist online.
But it's not wise to have, it's like, it's different to have it in every 400 little towns than to have the entire nation's voting database in one place.
Right.
That's scary.
Scary to a lot of people and will stop people from voting.
And the other
Well-
information
Well, if
that's
people are like
usually out there.
asking, people are asking, it's like, if I unregistered a vote today, will my name come off the list and it won't go? And it's like, no, that won't do it, but it's like, that's the sort of fear, this national database,
right.
that we're making a list of all voters, it generates.
44 states have a
And the other
concern.
information that's
Legitimate
typically there is the age of the voter.
Right.
And the
Senior
social
citizens are
security
voting.
number.
People shouldn't be afraid to vote.
It's just the name and the address and the party affiliation.
No, it's a
I know,
social
but when
security
you
number.
put that, if you have that public information, and then you tie it to whatever else public information is out there floating around on the internet, you can target people, you can get into their medical records. I mean, cyber crime is a real issue. I mean, we've seen, the
Yeah,
election
yeah,
integrity stuff,
yeah.
so it's like having this stuff just floating around out there. Particularly voters, I don't want voters targeted.
There are places that only
misinformation,
need the
for
last
scare
4 digits of your
tactics, for
social
anything.
security to verify something.
Yeah.
Right,
You,
what-
you didn't happen to hear Laura Canoy this
Yes.
morning?
I listened to Gardner, and I think
I was
there's a
driving.
great deal of controversy as to whether Mr. Kovac's letter mentions that this information will be made
I
publicly
understand
available.
I have concerns
But-
with him as an
I
individual
understand that
being in
he
charge of
sent
this.
out
Yeah.
a retraction letter. I haven't seen it,
Okay.
but I was told that last night.
Right, but
But
it
that,
seems to be
that,
very
that
confusing.
last line about the public seeing this, you can't see it. It's.
Our
it's the-
law says you can't see it, but that
No,
letter.
the federal law. The Freedom of Information Act specifically exempts that information. So that information is.
So, you're telling us that you will not, as a commission member, which I'm not sure you should be wearing both hats, you're saying that you will not allow this information to be made public in any way, shape, or form? Can you guarantee us to put our fears that you'll abide by those laws, you'll respect the spirit of those laws, and protect the privacy of New Hampshire voters? To your bet.
I will make sure,
You're making me nervous here.
I will make sure
You're
that
hesitating.
information is not gonna be put in the public domain.
Okay, okay.
So,
And
I don't know how
I-
else to.
Will it be
how
used by
else
the
to-
administration,
That's a
though?
good guarantee, and I
I
appreciate
don't
that.
want that information
That's a very good question.
to
So,
be,
here's my question though, so
that
will
somebody,
it, so will you
I don't want it
guarantee?
to be put online, I don't, and it was not, I mean, I didn't expect that it would be, but,
But so here's my
But-
question, if it's not going to be public
But-
record, can you guarantee that it won't be put online? Or not online,
Well,
or
it
not be
is
used?
exempt.
No, excuse me, I'm sorry, I
It
misspoke.
is, that is exempt from the Freedom of Information
Right.
Act at the federal level.
Can you guarantee-
This information is public in New Hampshire.
Right.
So, all that was requested was in each of the states, whatever information is available to the public. In this state, it's only name, address, and party affiliation. That's all that
Okay,
is
well,
being
my
sent.
follow-on question is, can you guarantee the current administration won't be using that database in any way, shape or form?
Good question.
That's a big
a lot of
concern,
questions.
that's a big
Yeah,
concern.
that's
Yeah,
At the bottom.
We
My
will,
other question is-
we'll have these
okay,
discussions
yeah.
when there's the first meeting.
And you won't
Sure,
turn over
you
the
can't
information
guarantee
until those
So you can't
conversations-
guarantee
Well,
that? Is that what you're saying, you can't guarantee
I
that?
wanna make sure that this is not in the public domain.
Yeah, yeah.
And what the guarantees are for that. And I expect that that is the case, and
Mhm.
before it gets turned over, I will make sure that I'm satisfied
Confident and
that,
satisfied.
that
Okay,
that's the case.
I appreciate that.
I
Secretary
guess
Gardner?
that my other concern about that would be at this point in time, no, when we were hearing that 44 states now have said they will decline to surrender this information.
See,
What
I
usefulness
can
will ours be?
categorically show you that that's just absolutely not true, because we're one of the 44. Because what they've actually said, and this is part of the problem of the misinformation. The 44, what they've said is, there are 44 states that have either said no, or they have said that there is certain information that they're not gonna give. So, we're not gonna give dates of birth, social security numbers, we're only giving what I said. So, but those 44, most of those 44 are turning over information. But it's the spin, you have to read you have to, and it's unfortunate because a lot of, if we're ever going to try to understand why so many people in this country feel that there's voter fraud. Gallup did the poll the week before the election, 55%. A second nationally reputable poll, same thing. Why is that?
But you have to
So-
define,
Because of things
you
like
have to
this.
define what they're asking is voter fraud, because people
I-
think there's
I-
all
I
sorts of
understand,
definitions.
But you have to realize that the person who got elected president won, this person got all these votes across the country.
Mhm.
And those votes may have come from people like that, maybe not. But how are we ever going to, well, first of all, we need to know why the people feel this way. We need to understand why so many people in this country feel this way, and why, after the election, they have asked this question going back 20 to 30 years. Did you feel that your vote was accurately counted? And do you have trust in the confidence of the process? That has never been below 50%. This election, it was for the first time going, so there's an issue in this country about whether elections are dishonest
And I
or
think we've
rigged
got
or.
a situation of the tail wagging the dog.
right.
Yes.
Because people have the perception, because there are people in New Hampshire, like the buses from Massachusetts, that you and I both know, that's just not true. So it's like for us to continually to adjust ourselves and our
Yeah.
processes to
I've
accommodate.
had people come in this office
Yeah.
in the last 3 months during the hearings on legislation, telling me that they saw the buses
They didn't
and
whip
But
out
they
they,
had no proof.
and,
Take a
you know, and I
picture.
always say, did you take a picture of the bus? Did you?
Did they record
So-
it at the time?
So these people that are saying these things, if
Alberta
6
Sarah
months
doesn't
from
count.
now, we don't turn over this information, they're gonna be emboldened. They're gonna be able to say, see, they won't even release public information. Information
See, and I
that.
think it's the other way
The other way
around. I think
around.
our
I think it's
catering to
kowtowing.
them is
Right.
building the momentum for.
Absolutely.
That's a
Absolutely.
difference.
And the
But-
consequence
Those are
is
the
that
That's a
same
people
different-
people.
don't
those are
vote.
the
And
same
why
people.
didn't they
Right.
report these
Right.
incidents
Right.
at the time?
Agreed.
Maybe they should be
Agreed.
prosecuted for abetting,
But
aiding
that's,
and abetting.
that's,
Yeah.
in my opinion, there's certainly nothing that we have to hide. And there is nothing that's
Agreed.
being given that the legislature hasn't passed legislation saying that this is public. Because, and this has been public since the 1800s, when the state first printed the ballot, and we had the first checklist, and those checklists are out at the archives. They're out there. So this has been public in New Hampshire now during 3 different
But
centuries.
the definition of public changes. So back in the 1800s, public meant something very different than it does today with the internet.
This is
You
the
know,
first
and
time it will be
electronic files
compiled
and
in its
hacking.
entirety.
So it's like, I mean, I understand you keep saying public, but that, you know,
But look at
you
what's
gotta
out there.
define
All
public,
your
what public is.
medical records, all that's out there. The federal government has a lot of information about people. This is just a very small.
Well, and it's like, but is not our voting, our
The most
voter,
sacred.
the most sacred thing in America
but
is our right to
it
vote.
doesn't have how you voted.
But if
It
it's gonna say
does.
what
That's part
party
of
I'm
affiliation,
affiliated,
it
or,
does.
you know,
Does.
they're looking for voter history.
Right.
So it's like they are looking for that information, and then they can micro-target.
Yeah, but okay.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time. And
Secretary?
there's no staff that works hard in the country than the New Hampshire Secretary of State's office staff. So I hope you understand, we appreciate that. I mean, it's in that spirit that we're coming here with our concerns.
Well, thank you for that.
They're busy
But
working.
yeah, before you leave, I'm gonna, I have, it's very important to me how people,
Proceed.
how many people vote in this state, and how we rank compared to the rest of the country.
Absolutely.
And the yellow is where New Hampshire, this is based on voting age population. In this election, if you based it on voting out, we would have had the second highest. But we are 0.3 of 1% from having had the highest turnout in the country. And this is the second presidential election that we've had photo ID. And this was the first presidential election that we had people's pictures taken. We had 1,024 pictures out of 755,000. That's one person out of 755. And a state like, whether you compare Oregon or you compare Missouri, you look and see. So I just want you to know that I would never support legislation that I believe in any way would
I believe that.
hurt the turnout.
I believe that.
And
Well, SB3 would
5
do that.
years ago, this was
You might-
this was a news story about photo ID. Opponents far outweighed supporters. Opponents argued that requiring photo identification will keep elderly, the poor, the disabled, college students, and minorities from voting. And this ended up this bill passed, and compared to the rest of the country, our turnout
But
in the
Bill,
last
you
two.
have to, we are the first in the nation. Politics is our sport. We don't have a football team, we have
And we have an
candidates.
older
So you've gotta
I
fill
know,
that into, like,
but
honest.
if you go back,
So-
this only goes back to 1980.
I know,
I have it going back to 1948.
I know, but it's like we
And,
weren't.
and so we weren't always up here. We have gradually, if you go back before
Mhm.
1980, and in 1984, we were actually below the country as a whole. We had a turnout in the presidential election of 1984 that was lower than the country.
Mhm.
We've never had one since, and we have only been on this rise, whereas
Absolutely.
other states have gone.
And I would argue, and I'll take
Yeah,
this,
you-
I would argue that part of this is because our,
Yeah, but we had
it's
the
all
first in the nation in the 1980s,
I know, but it's like
and the
part of it
turnout
is
was
like
low.
And our population is
the towns,
aging.
all the individual towns that are responsible for the voter, people feel secure, they're safe, they feel a part of it. And that's very different from all of a sudden a national register of voters. So it's like, I think part of our culture is, it's just,
Yeah,
it's
no,
out
I
of
hear
the
you. I
community
get
in
it.
our
I
town,
do
and
get
it's like, and
it.
with all due respect, I'm not worried about
I-
other states. I trust that there are good people in those states taking care of their business. We gotta care about New
I hear
Hampshire,
you,
okay?
and I.
I
You
appreciate
sound
you
like
taking
my
the
brother.
time.
Can
I
I-
mean, you
can I
sound
s-
like you've been the
Can I say
people.
something?
Yes.
Ms.
I,
Mr.
Yeah.
Secretary, I know that you want to allay the fears of the people who are saying there's voter fraud, but I think giving away our information only feeds into that intimidation factor, which is not going to help with the idea of voter fraud. Why not work towards changing the process so that people have more confidence in it, so that we make sure we don't have dead people on the rolls, or people who, live in two towns or whatever. I mean, I think there's a better way to make people more comfortable with the process, rather than turning over our information to a federal commission, which really we don't know what they're gonna do with it. And that's what we're not comfortable with, because it's not clear what's gonna happen once it gets down to Washington. And I personally don't trust that process. It's not that I don't trust you, I don't trust what's
Right.
going on down there and what they're gonna do
I'll
with it.
remember that. I mean,
So-
I've told you
Mhm.
what I'm expecting
Yeah.
with that information.
Well,
Can you
can we do
specifically
something
ask
to
that the
make the process
administration-
better here in New Hampshire? I mean, I love the idea of tying it to DMV. where
Like
that-
what?
Tying voter names to DMV. If you've got a license, in
Yeah.
Webster,
Yeah.
you can't be registered to vote
Well, see, you
in
can't, in New Hampshire,
Nashua.
we don't have the DMV doing the voter registration.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Maybe that's something we can work towards, so that, I think our records would be cleaner.
Well,
That's for the legislature.
Yeah.
See,
yeah.
we tried to balance
That's saying their
the
registration.
confidence and the ease
Yeah.
of voting,
Right.
not to make it so easy that people don't trust the process, and but not make it difficult so that some people, we're preventing them from voting. But confidence, in my opinion, is the most important factor. Because no matter how easy you make it for people to register to vote, no matter whether now this new idea of universal registration, that's not gonna solve the voting problem. Just like the NVRA in 1993, when the unique thing about New Hampshire is that we are one of only 3 states in the country that do not let people who show up at the polls to have to go home without voting a ballot like everyone else. 47 states in this country have provisional voting, which means that their ballot's not counted on election night. Their ballot is put in an envelope. They sign their name to it. And then they have to come back after the election before their ballot will be counted. And that's why the states, if you take the state of Oregon, with all mail voting, no polling places,
Right.
No one has to really make hardly any effort because the ballots are sent to them. Then they have multiple days to drop the ballots off in multiple locations. And if you look at their turnout compared to New Hampshire, when they first passed that in 1993, they not only are below us, but they've been getting more and more below us. And you'll see on there, they went from 11th state to the 14th state to the 17th state in 2012, and this time they went up to the 9th. But you'll see where we are, so to me, for 40 years, the states in this country have been trying all kinds of different ways to make it easier for people to vote. And the Justice Department has been breaking barriers, all kinds of different barriers down for voting for people. But our turnout in this presidential election, based on the voting age population, was actually lower than it was in 1992. And you'll see this, but you don't read this in the newspapers out there. You don't. So why is this? Why is it? And if it's always that it's the government's fault, it gives people an excuse. The founding fathers expected that there would be some effort. And so for people to have the will to do this, it has to have some value. And if there's a lack of that people see it as a value, then they're not going to make any effort. So that it doesn't matter how easy you make it, there's still that bit of effort. So we may disagree on the roadmap as far as how to get there,
Right.
and you may feel there's a better way to do it. But from all the years that I've experienced this and talked to people, to me, it's really the confidence. It's how confident the people are that first, that their vote's going to be accurately counted. And we have that paper ballot, so that gives, we don't have voting machines that are connected to the internet because we were the first state in the country to have a law that said that. Because when these first computer-based voting machines were first put on the market, one city in New Hampshire purchased them, and a computer scientist said, and this was back in the late 80s, that I can hack this system. This isn't safe. You should not be doing this. And they were all just a computer geek, don't worry about it. Second election, he taught at Riviera College in Nashville. He had a computer course there. And he had his students involved, and they came to Manchester, and people were outraged. I can't believe it. And so, even though they had only had those voting machines for 4 years, 2 legislators from the city of Manchester put a bill in together to say no one in the state will ever have this. And we were the first state in the country to go to a paper ballot. For the accuracy, because that's an important part of this, that people, and how did early voting begin? Did it begin because people thought that it would get more people to vote? That's not how it began. It began because right after the Help America Vote Act, there were some states that had punch cards, like Florida, and they decided to go to computer-based voting machines. And they used most of their Harvard money. Some states used all of it to buy state-of-the-art voting machines. And people started objecting. I don't trust this. I don't like this. I'm not going to vote anymore because I don't know how that machine works. So when it reached a critical mass, when there were enough people that was saying this, they couldn't just get rid of those machines. So what did they decide? Okay, we'll let you have your paper ballot, but you're not going to be able to vote on election day with a paper ballot because we're not going to have 2 different voting systems. So we'll give you 21 days or 25 days, states have, but we'll give you a certain number of days before the election to be able to use a paper ballot and vote. That's how early voting started. And then other states and other groups out there, national groups, picked up on it and say, oh, this is wonderful, we got to make it easier. But we have been making it easier for 40 years, all different ways to try to make it easier. But it will.
And if we
it
go
will
back-
never-
New Hampshire has the hard copy ballot, but it doesn't audit those
Yeah,
machines.
post-election audits do
Has
not
what?
happen.
Sometimes.
The New Hampshire automatic machines, the electronic machines,
That count
do
the
not,
ballots.
That count
are
them.
not audited to the paper ballot,
Post-election.
post-election. And our machines are vulnerable
Hackable.
for software bugs through the mother card that gets inserted onto those machines, and there's no check on it.
Right.
And there's nobody
Well, there is a-
technically savvy.
There is a check.
Well, not from, when they come in from the manufacturer.
There's 3 pages.
There's,
Wait a minute,
there's all kinds of
There's 3
checks.
pages in the law of what the local, 3 pages, I'll give it to you before you leave.
I understand that,
And it's a rigorous,
but the motherboard, who checks the software on the mother card that gets inserted into the machine?
that's what the check is.
Who does it?
We provide at least 50 sample test ballots. The law requires that they mark,
Who checks the software that's on that card?
the check is,
Do you have a software person? Do you have somebody who understands software,
the
can
soft-
read it, can see?
the memory card is the key.
Yes,
The memory card is the key. But the memory card is not connected to anything once you put
I
it in the
understand.
machine.
I
You-
understand.
So, yes, if someone got access to the machine, just like someone could stuff a ballot
or the
box,
card
if someone got access to the card, but to get access
prior.
to the card is to get into the machine.
No, the card comes external to the machine and
Well, that's the
plugged
town,
in.
but that's the clerk. The clerk, you have
And
to have.
During the Senate review of SB 109, the senators
card-
recognized
the
that
card
there
is
was a
given to the
vulnerability.
clerk. The card is given to the clerk. The clerk then has to publicly notifying the parties to send people. The public has the right to be there when this happens. Put the card in the machine, and then they take 50 or more ballots with all different markings. Make sure that every and they put it through and they get the count. Put it through, so that's the check. And it's a tedious process, but
Even the IRS, when we send in our 401 tax returns, they do a spot check. They don't check all the crap beforehand and all the detail. They just do a simple spot check. They do a random statistical spot check to guarantee.
well, our
accuracy.
check is,
We need an
we,
audit check.
we do more recounts in this state by far than any other state in
And
the
they
nation.
show a lot of errors.
Uh,
I've seen the
So-
data, hundreds of errors.
It's all public information. It's all in the red book.
But
You
it's not,
can
it's
go
not
back.
an audit.
And that's, I've done almost 500 recounts in my years. 11 of those recounts ended in a tie vote. 32 of those recounts ended in 1 vote difference. That's why, to me, 1 vote matters. Almost 100, it's in the 90s, of the recounts that I did ended either in a tie, 1, 2, or 3 votes. I can give you the chart because a year or so ago, we decided that we would actually do this. So we do more recounts than any other state.
That's a
The
good thing.
recounts are by paper ballot. I made that decision. It wasn't in the law, but I said, as long as we're gonna have machines like this, recounts are gonna be done by hand. A lot of states, they just put them back through the machine.
No good.
That is the test on the machine. And so we have the first, those machines that you're talking about, the first time they were used in New Hampshire was in the presidential election of 1988. So we're at 30 years of using those machines that are the optical scanning device. And I've had multiple statewide recounts, congressional recounts across the board. And that's the test. Because a lot of states make it very difficult to have recounts. Because nobody likes dealing with recounts. You've had a recount that was just, but the number of closed votes is really, it's amazing here. But
I've seen your data on your website, and I've looked at it myself. In some cases, like Rockingham County or some of the others, they show numbers that are well beyond the statistical number of like 0.5%. And that shows there's
But any candidate, even if a candidate only gets one vote, that candidate can have a recount. So it's the most accessible opportunity
that's a good thing.
to check on this process. And I'll tell you,
Maybe they all should do that.
the advantage that has been to us from 1978 until 1986, there were towns in this state that had punch cards. Hudson had punch cards. Concord had punch cards. A number of communities. And every time that I did a recount with those punch cards, there'd be some problem. Because it's always been my view that the fewer moving parts in the election process, the better it is. The simpler it is, because there's less way for mistakes to happen or other things that are not just mistakes.
Well,
So
sure,
so with the punch cards, I actually realized that you could put two through at the same time. In 1980, a ward in Concord, for the first 3 hours of voting in the presidential primary, the Democrats voted on Republican punch cards. And the Republicans voted, so a vote for Ronald Reagan was a vote for Ted Kennedy. Or a vote for Jimmy Carter ended up being a vote for Howard Baker. And there were a number of others. So the final straw for me, I'm doing a recount out at the Armory. And I have the two candidates sitting across. And I'm doing it with the two of them. And at the beginning we said, if two corners are punched out, we're going to count it as a vote. But if only one is, we're not. And indentations, we're not going to count unless the whole punch card is just indentation, because someone wasn't. So we do the recount. And we end up, it's a 3-vote difference. The winner says to me, I don't want this. I don't want this because this is ridiculous. And then the loser starts trying to convince the winner, and I'm just sitting there watching this, and tried to convince the winner to take it. In the end, the winner took it. But I told those two candidates that night, I said, I'm going to do everything I can so that no one else in New Hampshire sits at a recount like the two of you. So within a year, Hanover decides it wants punch cards. And Hanover came down to the Ballot Law Commission requesting it. And I got up in front of the Ballot Law Commission and I said, I want to give you my experience in each of the recount periods of the last 4 elections. And so, and we have it's all in the file here. And it was that Ballot Law Commission that said no more punch cards in New Hampshire and no lever machines in New Hampshire. So why did that happen here? How come Florida still had it? Because we have so many recounts. If a lot of states, you can only get a recount if you're like within 1/4 of 1% or 0.5%. Not like here, where it's very easy up to 3%, and then after that, you can still get it. So that's the check. That is the check on these machines, the paper ballot recounts, and we have so many of them.
And if we go back to, like, if your main priority is confidence, so, you know, most people have confidence in our elections here in New Hampshire, and in you and the staff here. I bet your phone has been ringing off the hook, saying that people don't have the same confidence in this commission and the national. So I ask you, please keep that in mind, and I don't want to continue to take up all your time. I know we popped in uninterrupted, so I want to thank you.
And so I'd like to just circle back to asking.
I mean, it just,
Yeah,
we share
the same
same
priorities
goals.
and the same
It
goals.
just,
Yeah.
Okay.
we might have a different approach.
If you're too trusting.
to get there.
I do.
mean,
Agreed.
That's,
Agreed.
and if I, something that I did or supported that resulted in, I
know
would
you
admit
feel-
it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I would work to change it.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
that's, but, and Andy Smith, Georgia was one of the states that
Yeah.
had these machines.
Yes.
And in 2005, they did a poll in Georgia asking people what the confidence level was. And I asked Andy Smith if he would do that same poll here.
Yeah.
He did that poll then, and he did it for the second time last summer, in July of 16, before all this stuff about the hacking and the confidence level of the people here is nothing like what other states that have asked that same question. So we do have a high.
I think we gotta push back on that, the buses from Massachusetts stuff, 'cause
Right,
that's
yes,
just not
right.
true.
Deny
And it's
that.
like, and I think that's what
Deny
impacts
it.
people's
Right.
confidence, is that
Yeah.
people keep
But
repeating it,
those are the
repeating it,
loudest
repeating it.
voices.
And it's like, and we need more
Right.
pushback
But
against
but
that.
don't you
It's
think,
not true.
I mean, and this is why
Yeah,
don't you think that if we're going to
Good morning, Secretary of State.
just sort of get that off the table, that we have to be open about letting people,
and I'm comfortable with them being open in New Hampshire.
Right,
I
but
don't
not
trust
sharing
this national
Washington.
It's like, I don't trust them. It's
I have a question. If at any time
Question?
on this commission, you feel like
Like what?
it is being used
If
for
while you're
wrong
on the
purposes,
commission.
or is it all
Onto
rightfully
that was-
resigned?
I'm sorry, I missed the
If you're on the
council.
commission,
Yeah.
at some point you're not comfortable with what the commission is doing,
Any-
then you
Okay.
resign.
I will add your
Or
name
would
to
you-
that
would you?
list.
Would you?
You're welcome.
I have
New Hampshire, yes.
either served on committees
You're very welcome.
or I've
Bye-bye.
worked with
What is that,
5 of
FedEx?
the people on the commission over the years. So I know them. I mean, I've worked with them.
Okay.
Uh,
If you want,
if
it
you-
was on the desk right out there that's got the
At
message
the
on it.
first
Someone will go
conference
through it.
call, when the vice president started talking about his vision, he said we should not have preconceived ideas about what the facts are gonna be. We should work for a common ground. We should work together to reach a consensus. So that was his message. And this.
You're so trusting.
Exactly. It's
So-
like,
Oh,
you
you're
have
so
more faith.
We don't trust them.
Mr.
Well,
Secretary.
I
but
don't-
it's
and
gonna
the
be an
vice pre-
open process.
I hope so.
Well, and
It's
that
gonna
we're
be an
trusting
open
on you.
process. And the thing is,
Right.
what I'm asking is, wait, and
Well, that's what it's like, you
rather
guys
than
have your
rather
first
than
meeting.
just it's a sham and it's a fraud and that doesn't.
We didn't say that. We came
No, I'm
in
not
and said
saying you
we
did,
had
but-
concerns, so because what came out in the press was that you agreed to it before we had, there was the first meeting. And it was in the press that this information is gonna be made public, so that's why it's like, wait, whoa, you didn't,
Well-
you're not gonna do that, right?
All
That's
that,
why
all that was agreed to was that nothing was going to be asked
Right.
for that was not already public information in the state.
Good morning,
That was,
Secretary of
that was
State.
all that,
Depends
and-
what your definition of is.
But once that
well,
information,
in this state, it's whatever the law says.
Yeah.
but
is
once that
public.
information
Yeah,
is
and the transfers.
gathered, you couldn't answer my question as a
Go ahead.
once that information is gathered, you still couldn't answer my question, sir, about where's the guarantee and where's our confidence level that the current administration will not use that national database for something.
I will-
That's a great concern to me. I agree with what you said. It may be nothing nefarious. It's all good. We're going to get a good outcome from it. But that data is now centralized and available
That's
to the
dangerous.
current administration. What are they going to do with
Yes.
it? And you don't have an answer for that, and that is my great concern.
Yeah, we are keeping
And that is a
this.
question I hope you will ask and then report back to us with the answer. Because they cannot have a centralized database with everybody's information on it. My great concern is that.
I'm less concerned with this administration as I am with
I
the
will
Russian
add your name to that.
administration, quite frankly. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you for your
I
time.
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.